Now let me talk about what I do when a session is over. After the reorientation is done and their eyes are open, I will often say to the client, and you heard me say this with Sheila, so about how long did that session feel? Now Sheila said, about 15 minutes. She was actually guessing. In fact, sometimes I wish I didn't turn the camera off. After I turned the camera off, she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got that right 15 minutes because it actually felt like 3 minutes. So she gave the answer that she thought that I wanted to hear on video. But the reality is it was a wild guess for her. She had no clue how long that session was. This is called time distortion in hypnosis. But I use time distortion, which is a natural phenomena in hypnosis, at the end of almost every session because it becomes a proof. It becomes a proof to the individual that, wow, even though I was conscious the whole time and even though I could hear the hypnotist the whole time, it really happened. It really was real. It really did work. And of course, if my client has that belief, they will act in accord with that belief and follow through on the suggestions that have been made during the session. So here's how it breaks down. About 80% of my clients, when I say about how long did that feel, they'll say this. Wow, it felt like 5 minutes. By the way, my first session with a client is typically the hypnosis part about 25 to 30 minutes. Okay, my average. I'm going to say actually 30 minutes. Okay, so sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more, but right around 30 minutes. It felt like it was about 5 minutes. Now, there's actually a clock across from my chair, so I can actually see how many minutes it was. Earlier I had to look at the camera timer, but normally there's actually a big digital clock, like one that sits by the bedside, so I can actually see how long the session was. And I'll almost always say to my clients, it may have only felt like it was 5 minutes, but really it was 32 minutes. And they'll say, oh my gosh, wow, that's incredible. Felt like 5 minutes. And I will say to them, that's great. That means you were able to let go and really enjoy the process of hypnosis, learning. I know that you are going to do well. So again, that's another suggestion, even though our hypnosis session is over. That's about 80% of the people. About 15% of the people will say this. Well, gosh, I know that I wasn't here 8 hours, but it felt like it was 8 hours long. It's time distortion the other direction. And I'll say to them, well, you're right, you weren't here for 8 hours. It was only 32 minutes. And they'll say, wow, it felt like it was, days. Right? And I'll say, that's fantastic. That means you were really able to, to let go and follow the process and experience hypnosis. I know you're going to do really well. Again, I'm giving them a suggestion. They'll get a big smile on their face, and they'll say, awesome. About 5% of my clients do what Sheila did. They give the answer they think that I want to hear, and so they actually give their best guess. Or they actually nail it right on the head, because they were paying attention. And I'll say, about how long did that session feel? And about 5% of them will say this, it felt like it was about 32 minutes long. And I'll say to them, you're right, it was 32 minutes long. That's great. That means you were able to listen to each and every word that I used and to follow the process very well from start to finish. That lets me know that you're going to do really, really well. I'm so glad that you came here today. And again, another big smile across their face. So it doesn't matter what the answer is. My answer is always the same. But you're going to be amazed at this phenomena of time distortion and how profound it really is with the clients that you work with. So that's the first thing I do when a session is over, is I cover this issue of time distortion and couple it with a positive suggestion. Then I will almost always say to my clients, and do you remember the suggestions that I gave you? Again, this is my office. It's not a stage hypnosis show. I don't want them to forget that they were participating. That was one of the hypnotic amnesia is a hypnotic phenomenon. It's one of the bits in the stage hypnosis show. They'll give the suggestion that they won't remember the show. In fact, that when they come out of hypnosis, they will be ready for the show to begin, right? This makes for a funny bit using this hypnotic amnesia when people have been up there for an hour and 15 minutes and they say, when's the show going to start, right? But my office is not a stage hypnosis show. I'm trying to accomplish something entirely different, and so with my clients, I want them to remember what happened during the session. I want them to remember the suggestions that I gave, and so I'll say to them, do you remember some of the suggestions that I gave? And this is often a lot like asking somebody about the dream that they had last night. They remember bits and pieces, and more of it come to them. And sometimes I will fill in some of the suggestions that I gave to them, so that they leave knowing that I've given them what they came to my office for. Now, one of the things I do not ever do is I do not ever give my clients a recording of the actual session. There are many reasons why I do not do this, mainly because the session that I just did was sort of, expired. In other words, it was in the present moment. I usually give clients MP3s or CDs that are skill building, like that induction or like a mindfulness meditation MP3. And I'm going to cover that actually here in a later video. But I don't record my session. I want my sessions to leave on a high note, and diddling around with equipment and making a recording for them is not something that I teach or that I ever utilize with the clients I work with. By the way, this is a great post-hypnotic suggestion, though. The post-hypnotic suggestion is, and when we're done with our session, I'm going to give you an MP3. It's a practice of mindfulness or relaxation or whatever skill it is. And over the next week, between now and your next session, each and every day, listen to that MP3 once a day, practicing the skills contained therein. So if I've given that suggestion, which I probably have, at the end of my session, I'm also going to give them either email the MP3, because that's what most people want, or I will give some of them an actual CD where I burned an MP3 to it so they can listen to it on a CD player. And I'll sort of cover the instructions for that. If there's going to be a successive session, I try to book it before they leave. And the reason why is they're more likely to show up and more likely to follow up than if they call the office to schedule another appointment. So I try to do that. But that really summarizes how I end the session. And the one thing I do not do is I do not spend a lot of time processing with clients, because I probably have another appointment. And so when I'm done with those things that I just covered, I will almost always say, I'm really glad that you came, and I'll stand up and shake their hand. When I shake their hand, they're almost always still sitting in a chair, and it becomes a cue for me to help them stand up. Now we're both standing up, and it's really easy for me to essentially walk them to the door. I might even point out to them, notice the threshold on your way out. And boy, they feel fantastic. But I do want to keep the trains running on time. And so doing more therapy after the session is not something that I find valuable. If there's something that remains or needs to be dealt with, I will bring that into a successive session. Just like this video, where each video has built on the previous videos. In multiple session hypnosis, successive sessions build on the previous sessions. So we don't have to get everything done in one session today. The best example of that is my smokers, right? A lot of them are worried they're also going to gain weight. So I tell them that in the first session, you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to gain that much weight between now and your next session. So we're going to focus on becoming a non-smoker today, and we'll deal with that in a second or a third session if that's an issue for them. So again, I don't have to solve everything in one day. I really want a singleness of purpose in my sessions, and concluding a session with those elements that I just discussed, and not sort of reopening the therapeutic process or the pre-talk process is something that I think is really important for practice management and for truly benefiting our client. So these are the things that happen in the conclusion of my hypnosis session with a client.